Welcome to Feed Your Lion. I'm Dr. L.I.O.N, and I'm here to aid you in the mastery of total health, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and financial. So prepare to have your wellness tank filled up with this podcast. Welcome to another episode of Feed Your Lion podcast. Today's special guest is my cousin. This is Andrea Witmer. We're going to talk about a topic that affects a lot of people and I think is kind of taboo in some circles and needs to be talked about a little more. So, cuz I'm so glad you're here today. Like I love what you do first off. Like I love everything about what you did and what you started and I think it's amazing and I'm really excited that you're here to talk to people about it. So just to give a little introduction, my cousin works with victims of sex trafficking in different circles and she's going to kind of tell the story. I don't want to like take away any of your thunder on this, but she's been doing this how long now?
It'll be 8 years in March.
8 years in March. Okay. So you've encountered so many things too, and you float by it with such grace, and you've expanded this to like some crazy level that I don't think people can like comprehend, like how you even like did all this stuff, but I'm gonna like let you tell the story. So just kind of start off like talk about how you got involved in this to begin with, and like was it something like you knew like, hey, this is always a group of people, I wanted to go into the prisons, I wanted to do this stuff, or like how did that come about? Like was that on your heart for a long time or did it just kind of happen?
Sure. First off, just want to thank you for having me on, and you know how much I love you.
I know.
I'm
I love you.
9 years older, so I've known you since you're
A
but
little chap.
just a little chap. So thank you. This is
Absolutely.
fun.
Yes.
It's interesting and a difficult topic, but I'm appreciative of you allowing me this time. We actually little backstory. I've been married 23 years now, and at the time of beginning the ministry, we had 5 children. And so we had actually received a call from a local woman who did prison ministry. And she had asked me, it was in March of 2016. She said, hey, we have a lady who's incarcerated in the state prison. She is due any day now, and we're looking for a family that can take the little baby once they're born. And then the whole point of that ministry was to be able to reunite the mom and child after they finish their sentence. And that way, like if they had no family for the child to go to, or otherwise children youth could come into play, and they were trying to just, make other efforts for that. And so I immediately said yes without even asking any details.
No
And
questions, just yes.
no question, sure. And she kind of laughed and she was a little puzzled. She said, maybe do you want to ask your husband first? I'm like, I guess, I said, I can do that. But I also knew Jeremy, his heart. And actually, when I asked him, he was like, why are you asking me? Of course, no problem. And so, and the first time I had never been into a prison before. And so March of 2016 was the first time that I actually went to one of the 2 state prisons in Pennsylvania, and it was in Muncie, Pennsylvania. And that was a whole new experience. If you haven't been before, you have all these preconceived notions of what it's like.
Yeah.
And so I approached the visitors area and then went through, make sure I had, if I had too many bobby pins in my hair or anything.
Yeah.
But then they sent me to the visitors area to wait the mom to come out. The point was to meet the mom before she delivered.
Okay.
And that day she was in the infirmary. And so because her water had broke and they said she couldn't come to the visitors area. So I thought, well, I'm not going to get to meet her. But one of the guards said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and we're going to walk you back. Okay. Which I thought, wow, that's great, because it's not something they do.
Yeah.
And so that day I got to go back and I went to the infirmary, and they put us into like a little janitor's closet because they didn't have a no contact room. And next minute here, the lady came in, and then she immediately came over and just gave me a hug and introduced herself. So I thought, okay, we're going to get along just fine. She's my kind of people.
Yeah.
And it just kind of struck me, because I was trying to take it all in. But we only were in there for about 45 seconds before one of the COs came in and they yelled out her last name to get to her room. And then they yelled at me to go take a seat on the bench. And so I obeyed and I went and sat down, and two women that were incarcerated were sitting next to me. And I found it so humorous because they just were so serious, but they looked over at me and said, "Welcome to prison." Like, yeah, because I was like, "Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, you tell me what to do."
That
But
that would probably freak a lot of people out though. Like that, first of all, it's your first time in a prison, and then like right off the bat, you're kind of getting yelled at. Like that's just like you're a prisoner, almost. It's kind of
right.
crazy.
Well, and I'm being polite here. I mean, they yelled, they yelled. They was very the whole point was they didn't have a no contact room. And with her being in the condition she was in, they felt that it would have been safer to be in a no contact room. And so we only got to meet 45 seconds. The next
Yeah.
call that I received was that the baby was born and to come pick up the baby at the hospital. And so we packed everybody up in our car, and we were all like, it's like a bittersweet. You're all excited, but
Hmm.
then you're feeling bad for the mom,
Yeah.
because not, if anyone's ever had a child, there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of physical aspects. And if you can only imagine delivering a child, not getting to take them home with you, and then
Yeah.
returning to prison to heal,
Yeah.
it's not a good mix. But we went, and normally they only allow you about an hour with the mom at the hospital, but the guards were great. They thought I was nice. They were like, "Hey, you're a hoot. We're just going to let you sit here." And so I got to sit there for 8 hours of her being
Wow.
there, and got to hold the little baby,
Mm.
her. And then I was in the nursery and I was dressing him for his little take home outfit and putting his little bow tie on and getting him all cute. But one thing I think that really just started the whole process with the ministry is I was in the nursery and the transport team had come from the prison. And all of a sudden, I could hear the shackles and chains on his mom coming down the hallway.
Mm.
And she was going past the nursery area, but you could hear it seemed like the loudest echo. I'm sure it wasn't, but I just distinctly remember, still to this day, it gives me chills, that sound. And I thought to myself, it just broke me because here I am getting him ready to go home and I'm excited and I've
Hmm.
already fallen in love with him. But then the reality was, there she goes. She just gave birth. She's back in shackles and chains and going back to heal at a state prison.
Yeah.
And it just broke me at a different level.
Hmm.
And so that's where I really feel that I didn't really have any ideas before then of starting ministry or doing prison ministry. I mean, I always try to help people and be good to them, but that just hit at a different level.
Yeah.
And so that's where in March of 2016, that's what just broke my heart to even begin this step. And shortly after, she on her birthday, I went in to visit with her in May, and her favorite things were a honey bun and a Mountain Dew. So that's how we celebrated her birthday in state prison. She asked, she said, "Hey, I have a funny question to ask you." I said, "Okay." And she said, "Would you like to adopt him?"
Mm.
And I was assuring her that we would be there and to help her and get her set up. But she knew already what she was going to do or not do. And she said, "Listen, I will find someone else if you don't want to, but I figured you already loved him by this point." And she was correct on that. And we loved her too. And that was the bittersweet of it.
Hmm.
And so we said yes, and we began the process of adoption. And in August, she was released in 2016. By that time, I had met a lot of women in the visitors area. And a lot of times people feel that, someone who's incarcerated, they have a label on them.
Hmm.
They even have a label on the family members. But looking around in the visitors area, they were just like you and me.
Hmm.
There was moms and grandmas and aunts and uncles and children come to visit their loved ones. And the women that were incarcerated, yes, did they commit a crime? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Were they consequences? Absolutely. But it didn't always make them just a horrible person. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I'm along really well with a number that I met. And so when she was released, I just knew that that couldn't be the end of the story. I
Mm-hmm.
thought this could get over.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know what to do. And so it kind of led me down a few rabbit holes. Uh, I started investigating and looking up prostitution rates, incarceration rates with prostitution, addiction rates, just the whole thing that I'd been seeing within the prison system with the women.
Sure. Yeah.
And it led to a site called, which, if anyone, my cousin knows my maiden name, but it was called Hookers for Jesus. I was like, what? What is this? And
Funny, actually. That's really funny.
strangely enough, my maiden name is Hooker, so that works really well.
That really was like, okay, there's my key right there.
I thought, wow, I've never in my life in any of the churches that we've ever gone to in our whole existence, I had never heard of that, but here it was an amazing lady who lives in Las Vegas, and she has this amazing organization. She's even on Facebook and social media, but she had been in the adult industry,
Mm-hmm.
and she came out of it, and she started making safe homes and resources to help other women who are in Las Vegas and the surrounding areas get out of it.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it, because I'm 49 now, is back in the 80s, there was these amazing Christian big hair rock bands. And there was one called Striper. And she married one of the members of Striper.
Really?
Kind of cool because I was like, hey, I remember those groups. But that was one site that caught my attention. And then another was of a lady who she started going into the adult strip clubs and taking food and resources and just trying to just be loving and compassionate to women. And again, I thought, out of any sign up I've ever seen at church, that is not one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I never saw a sign up to go to the local strip club,
Yeah.
you know, out to people. But that's where it became. It just it started something in me, and then I thought to myself, and you can relate to our friends and family. I thought, please go away. I cannot do that. What are people going to think about me?
Well, in context, we come from a very ultra conservative,
Yes,
like Pilgrim holiness background, and yeah, there's certainly a lot of like expectations placed. So yeah, like yeah, absolutely, I
I
get.
topic at the Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. Andrea has started this ministry going to a strip club, but I thought this could be.
I
So,
love
but
it.
anyway, I prayed about it. I was trying to give thought to it. I didn't have a manual of, how to do
So,
this.
so
And I
how long
actually,
were you before you say that? Like, how long were you just at the prisons before you started branching out into these other things? Like, what was that time frame?
well, I went to the prisons in March of 2016. And
Yeah.
then his mom in August of 2016. And that same month is when I just started researching and
Okay.
doing.
Okay. Okay.
And that
So not a long
beginning,
time.
no, not a long time, because I knew that once you see something, or if you start to see injustice and things that you just know, you can't wrap your mind around it. You can't unsee those things,
Yeah.
at least for me. And so I told Jeremy, my husband, about it, and I said, I think that I'm supposed to go in and try to offer food and maybe clothing if they have children, diapers, wipes. And I said, but what are people going to think about that?
Hmm.
And he said, you know what? It doesn't matter.
Yep.
He said, it's what God thinks of it. He said, that's all that matters. That's the most important. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks.
Yeah.
So he gave his thumbs up, and he said, you do whatever you feel you're supposed to do. So
Yeah.
that was nice. But in some ways I was hoping, like, okay, tell me no, tell me no. Because
Yeah.
and so I approached a local, when I was younger, I was in a lot of clubs in my life. I definitely
Yeah.
experienced a lot of clubs in my younger years, but I had not been into a strip club. oddly enough. And so that was the first time I approached one. I only knew, what I'd seen in the movies and TV.
Yeah.
And even in that, I kind of glamorized it, even
Yeah.
though, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And so when I went into the first one, I thought, how do you do this? You just walk in. I offered to pay the cover, and there no women are free. And I was like, okay. And you can imagine, I'm sure you can picture this,
I
but
love it. I love it.
I just immediately was taken back because honestly, I figured it would just be very glamorous, that everything would be very fancy, that the women would absolutely be the most beautiful women you've ever seen in your life. They would be built the most amazing because, why else would anyone be leaving their families or their significant others to go
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
And right away, I mean, that particular place, it was like a dump. And
Yeah.
then I started looking around. I'm like, wow, the women are just like not taking away from them, but just average. And
Yeah.
hey, it just really surprised me.
Yeah.
And I was able to speak to one of the managers and I told them what I wanted to do. And he was so funny because he was like, honey, what are you smoking? And I started laughing because I said, I'm not smoking anything. And he said, well, normally the Christians are outside protesting us. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. I just want to come in and bring food and see if they have any needs. And again, I expected him to say no, to give me another pass out of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he said, I don't even know why I'm saying this, but okay, okay. And so the following week, I went with one of my friends from Department of Health, and she made amazing food. She's about 20 years older than me, and she had not been into an adult club herself, so that was an interesting experience for her. But she was amazing because she had always worked with a lot of individuals and moms and women in the area through the
Yeah.
Department of Health. So
Yeah.
she had insights of things that she had seen. And food across the board is just an amazing starting point. If you don't know what to do for someone, put food in front of them.
You're right. Food, look at all the conversations and things. What do? We sit down, we share a meal or go get a coffee. I mean, you're right. Like food is
Yeah,
can always be a starting, it's universal. Everybody eats, right?
yeah. And the one thing that they loved is that it was comfort food. It
Mhm.
was just, felt like comfortable. It felt like a warm hug. It felt like embracing to them. And you have to understand too, I mean, they have such a history. There's been abuse, there's been trauma, they've been lied to. There's different aspects with each woman, but they just really appreciated just a simple act of a really good meal and just talking with them, not judging them,
Mhm.
not in questions that, like, why are you choosing this? And
Yeah.
you should here. We did not, and I didn't go in with a Bible thumping it over their heads.
Right.
We just went in with food and love and resources that just some simple ones I had.
Yeah.
So that was all my plan was. I didn't have anything outside of that because I thought that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
But very quickly, within the first couple of weeks, I had a lady approach me in the club and she wanted to get out. And I thought to myself, now what do I do?
Yeah.
I don't have anywhere for her to go. And so we were scrambling, and Jeremy was talking about throwing rooms up out in our shop, and we didn't know what to do. And so in the beginning, I used some of the local, like, government agencies, um, like women's centers,
Yeah.
but I found out that that didn't work very well
Yeah.
because end of the day, they were still a number in those organizations, and the women felt that. They
Mm.
knew it, they could sense, they knew if they weren't there, that bed was still filled.
Yeah.
And so they go back into the industry.
Yeah.
And I told Jeremy that, how is this going to work if I just go get them out for them to go right back into it?
Yeah.
And so the lady that was from the Department of Health, she was just a huge prayer warrior. And she said, we're just going to take care of this. Don't you worry about it. And I thought, I'm worrying. I'm worrying. But she was pretty sure that it was going to be handled. Well, one of her friends that, again, about 20 years older than me, had a house that sat empty except for her. And She offered to open her home up to any woman that I got out. And
Wow.
I said, hey, do you understand what you're doing here? And she said, probably not. She said, I don't, I'm not a counselor. I don't have any license. I'm not a psychologist. But she said, I can show them unconditional love, compassion. I can be a mom, an aunt, a friend, a sister, whatever they need. And I will walk this journey with them. And so,
Wow.
you know what? We're going to just give it a try. And very quickly, I filled the house up. I don't think that she could even see what was coming. But still to this day, almost 8 years later, her home is still in use.
Really?
She's one
Wow.
of the biggest supporters. And now, fast forward almost 8 years later, we have 16 homes that they're not organizations, they're not funded by the government, they're not giving grants, but just the homeowners themselves they're all women. Um, they just felt the desire to help the women and children that we help and to get out.
So how did you find these? I mean, the one was through your friend, but how did these other women come into this? Like, how did you?
Well, throughout the time, they had friends. They had friends. And a lot of the women, they either didn't have children or their children were grown, raised out the door.
Okay.
And so, honestly, out of the whole 8 years, I only had one time that we had to make some adjustments and couldn't use the home. But outside of that, I mean, it's really been that. And what I noticed too is the women weren't going back into the industry because for the first time, they were actually experiencing that unconditional love and compassion
Mm,
and someone staying true to them on this journey that most don't understand. Most can't comprehend what they've been through. And that
yeah.
I think changed everything with the
Well,
ministry.
I think you hit it on the head there because really I don't think there's really any major change without love involved, right? Like I mean that's the ultimate. We don't change with our thinking power. I was just actually my favorite book, Think and Grow Rich, even this morning. It's funny that you said that because this morning I listen to it again every year, and this morning he was just saying you don't change with your thinking and your reasoning, you change with your heart and your emotions, and like that's through love. Like, and I mean it just hits the nail on the head with what you said. I mean, you can have all the brilliance in the world working with people, but if they don't feel like somebody cares about them, like what's it matter?
Well, and I have had people say, "Hey, we need you to recreate your what they'll call a safe home.
Mm,
You need to tell us, so we can duplicate it." But the problem is, sure, I can tell you how many beds to get and how many sheet sets and how many towels and shampoos and things like that. But I can't recreate or duplicate someone's desire and willingness to actually love someone, to
yeah,
show them the passion to walk along in this journey without the judgment that they've been so used to.
yeah,
Because so often the women and children that we help, they've been just disregarded in our society. I've had even some churches say, we don't want to deal with those type of people, which always shocks me because I thought, I guess we're reading a different Bible because the one that I read, it clearly talks about helping orphans and widows and those that are incarcerated and
and
down on their luck. So I think we must just have the different version, maybe.
yeah, that's always incredible to me and in general. So have you had any like let me ask you, have you had any like church support at all, like when you've reached out? Like, I know when we were talking before, you talked about the one pastor who said, well, this doesn't exist in my community or something like that. Like, very like, I mean, has that been a common thing, or have you had any churches who are more like open to that, like at all?
Well, I think what's interesting is some of the top purchasers of women and children in the industry are unfortunately pastors,
Yeah,
judges, and police officers,
yeah,
people that are set up to protect individuals.
yeah,
Um, that I've seen time and time again. In fact, one of the massage parlors that is in the adult industry in one of our local venues, um, I went in for the first time back about 8 years ago to see, along with the adult strip clubs, if there was any way that I could help the women that were working there. And before I had pulled in, I noticed, I was still out on the road on the highway, that there was a gentleman coming out that I knew who he was. I heard him preach in my life.
Yeah.
And he was out of the massage parlor, but I thought, Andrea, don't throw him under the bus. Maybe he's doing ministry, although I thought probably not the best,
Yeah.
but again. And so I waited until he left, and then I just kind of played dumb, and I went in and introduced myself, and I said, "Hey, did you know the guy that just left?" And they said, "Yeah, he's one of our regulars. We get a lot of Christian type people here." And I said, "Okay." And I thought, "I'm sure you do," because I had already started to see.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think this topic, it touches a little close to home,
Yeah.
and different ways that people respond. At one point in time, a few years ago, I had made a Facebook post. Basically, I got, I, I did get frustrated with seeing individuals that, they would preach on like man-made standards,
Yeah.
but I would see them in the adult club. And so my posts pretty much pertain to, hey, if you're gonna, preach about jewelry and short sleeves and shorts, just don't be the, number one customer at the strip club.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
so my messenger and my phone pretty much lit up that day. I had multiple pastors reaching out to me from different movements, I'll say that way. And I even had a wife show up in my driveway. And I had two pastors admit to it. They thought I saw them. I didn't, but they thought I did.
Are you serious?
And so
Wow.
that was interesting. And then I
So
actually, a
were they
pastor,
were
oh, go
they
ahead.
reaching no, were they reaching out because they were like mad about your post or because they wanted to like apologize? Like what was the
They wanted me to take the post down.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
Wow.
so the one pastor, and of course I wouldn't say any names, but the one pastor that many would know, he was on a platform across the world at a convention. And he actually got off the platform. I didn't know he was across the world when I called him back. And I told him he didn't have to, get off the platform. But he said, "No, I need to talk to you." And he said that he saw my post and that he would like for me to take it down. And when I asked him why, he told me, he said, "Well, if people didn't like me, they would think it's me." And I said, "Well, if you didn't do anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about. And no, I'm not going to take my post down," because it was accurate. And I wasn't going to cover up um, that injustice just to protect someone. And so some churches don't want anything to do with our ministry. Again, I think it touches too close to home. Pornography addictions, addictions to the sex industry, they're very high in our church realm. They just are. We can't continue to just ignore it and sweep it under the pew.
You know what? Speaking of pornography in the church realm, I read an article and I can't remember the exact statistics, but it was higher in like the
Yeah,
communities that claim Christianity, like, across the board, all the rates of that was higher. And, you know, I don't I don't know if that's from like a repression or like like we're like I think in a lot of ways people are like taught to be ashamed of like sex or like there's not like
sure.
it's not like conceived in a healthy way or talked about I don't know what but it is like it seems to be a bigger issue in the church communities. Like I agree. I mean even like statistically it's higher.
It
So
is, and that's what a lot of times they don't want to take into account. So they, instead of just addressing it, I talk to pastors that say, "Hey, this doesn't happen," or "It doesn't happen in our church." And I'm like, "Listen, you have this many people in your church. There absolutely are individuals that have an addiction to pornography.
yeah,
There's the individuals that struggle with adultery, maybe keeping faithful to their spouse or significant other.
yeah,
Um, and I have seen many, many, many people within the church realm in this industry
yeah,
purchase other human beings for
yeah.
whatever. look like. And so I think that we just need to have the open conversations, but because it's dealing in a sexual nature,
Yes.
often because of the way people are raised or what they've been taught, they don't feel comfortable to do that. But then when it's hidden in the darkness, I
Yeah.
mean, it's going to come to light at some point in time. So I just always tell churches, listen, just be open about it. It's
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
happening with church walls.
Yeah.
Have the So if people are struggling with these addictions, they have a safe place to come to and talk to people and say, listen, this I'm struggling with this. I need help.
Yeah.
And so they don't have to feel ashamed about it.
Well, honestly, like I see it too from the other side because I do a lot of sexual wellness in my health and wellness business. Like it's a big portion of what we do. And I mean, I'm in Appalachia and people are like so afraid to talk about this. And I've tried to normalize like having conversations because
Right.
sex is a part of life. I mean, people have sex. Like it's, and these ashamed things or the traumatic things that people have had happen, and I'm like, that's the first step is just being able to have a discussion, on anything, like just be able to talk about it and not feel like ashamed about it or to like voice that, like I don't know, it's so it is a thing. It's especially like, like where I'm in an Appalachia area, like it's a very taboo subject and I'm trying to make that like less so, like because people do need to be able to talk about it to have like healthy like a healthy relationship with, sex and their partners and their spouses. Like, it's just,
Right. Well, and often too, I noticed that, and some churches have been wonderful. They've had me come and speak. They've been very supportive. Hey, what can we do for you? How can we help? And they've really embraced it. And, even know, yes, we have this going on, but we want to just be helpful. We don't want to
yeah,
hide, want to be open about it. And I love that when they do that, just because I'm like, you can't solve anything if you deny it.
yes,
And I think that's the beauty. So I pray for the ones that want to keep covering things up and just not admit to it. And then I'm just thrilled with the ones that are willing to embrace our ministry and help however they can. We've also had some issues because we're in central Pennsylvania, and in our community there's a large number of Mennonite and Amish,
hmm,
and again a very strict religious group of individuals.
hmm,
And just recently, in the last 6 months, I've had individuals reaching out to me that have come out of those communities and some that are still in, to let me know about the abuse and the trauma and the sexual abuse and the trafficking that goes on in those communities, to see if I could help them. And what's so sad is so many individuals, the women and children, they're being sexually abused. They're being sold within their communities, even to outsiders, whether it's at a local auction, different parties that they have, but it's covered up because they have a group of elders or deacons. So when it comes about, the gentleman will go to them and they'll confess what they've done wrong. But what happens is they re-victimize the victim. They'll have the wife or the child come before the group and apologize for tempting, apologize for not doing their wifely duties. If you had done these things, this individual would not have strayed to abuse another person. And I just think that that needs to stop. I didn't come from that community. And so I'm not sure exactly how they need me to be in place, but you can't hide under a religious umbrella and be abusing individuals,
yeah,
just thinking, okay, this religious umbrella, we're allowed to do these things, but those communities themselves, they hold a lot of power. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of influence, and the police and the FBI have been involved in many cases, but they just miraculously go away without it being exposed. And so there's a lot of payoffs, and once we got involved there, we had some interesting things happen. Jeremy's his one trailer, he was going down the road and a wheel went off. All the lug nuts have been taken off the trailer wheels, all of them. We had some individuals poking around our property. We've had some individuals that have tried to kind of puff up out in our society, from those group of people. But the bottom line is while I don't take those things lightly, it isn't going to stop me from helping the women and children. that are being abused and trafficked.
So as far as like you said there, and I talked to you on the phone about this a little bit, but you said you actually went to one of these auctions to kind of take a look, right? Like, did you at all feel uncomfortable there? I mean, like, was it blatantly obvious? Like, how did that work?
Well, this particular auction, the individuals that had come out of the Amish community had had a meeting with me at a local mega church in State College. And there was also individuals there that were still in the community. And their hearts are just broken because the one individual who's very open and tries to help other individuals who have been abused. They're like a translator in court for the Amish.
Mhm.
She's an amazing woman, but she told me a story of her abuse and her sexual abuse growing up. And when she finally went to the police about it, she was married at that point. They just, they lost the report. They couldn't find it. Oh, they changed detectives. Oh, are you sure you had this? And yet the detective was at her home. And so there was always some kind of stumbling block. And so at a certain time, she said, you know what? I just gave up. I thought nothing's going to happen. No one's going to hear my voice. And so she gave up. Only 2 years later, she said, I'm reaching out to you because I know what you do. And I feel that you can help us in this area. And she started the whole process again. And so they let me know about a local auction where a lot of people know what is going on there. And they said, can you go check it out? I said, sure. So I got there at around 9 o'clock at night because they said, it would be a little more busy at that time. And it was a local livestock auction. I'll say that. I don't want to,
Yeah.
deter from or stuff, but immediately when I arrived, there was a lot of trailers and trucks, and it was just very disorganized in the parking lot, very busy. And so I just went over by a tree line to try to park and see what I could see. And immediately I saw Amish and Mennonite individuals partying, large amounts of alcohol, which I thought, okay, I mean, a lot of times people do that. I saw large amounts of drugs. I saw women that didn't have the traditional Amish or Mennonite wear, but sorry, I think I my battery. But they were not even trying to hide it. Like my lights were still on my headlights, and they were involved in sexual activity right in front of me
Hmm.
with the Amish and men.
Hmm.
I also saw a large number of little girls, about 5 or 6, being led down to a wooded area by teenage boys. And by that time, it was like 10 o'clock at night. It honestly made no sense to me, where they were going. No one was with them like an adult. And then the one area that they talked about women and children being for sale, um, there was a large presence of men back in that area. But the only thing is yes, I carry and I have a permit and things like that. I didn't feel it was best for me
Yeah.
to go back to that large group of men who absolutely are going to be armed and
Yeah.
could overpower me. But just what I saw myself. And then
Yeah.
we had an individual that actually was willing to talk with us. And she was underage. And we were able to talk with her. We took her to a different area. She literally, when we came back, she literally rolled out of the car along the tree line so that no one could see her.
Wow.
We offered a way for her to get out, but she said, Andrea, I have siblings. I have younger siblings. And I just feel like if they can do it to me, then I can protect my siblings. Maybe they won't do it to them. But
Yeah.
she's absolutely being abused sexually, being sold. And she said, everyone has this mentality that the Amish and Mennonite is just this peaceful group of people. Oh, look at their lifestyle. It's amazing. And, it's touristy. And she said, and people think it's just so bright. But she said, Andrea, there's nothing bright about my life. She said, my soul couldn't be more dark because she said, do you know what it's like to be abused over and over again? And no one's going to hear your voice. No one, they believe you, they know it happens, but because they are all involved, so many are involved, they just cover it up for each other. And so she felt that she needed to stay in order to try to protect her siblings which she said she knew inevitably were going to be abused anyhow. And that to me just broke my heart. But the police and FBI had been involved there, but they just went away. And the individuals that reached out to me, they said, Andrea, they were paid off. They were paid off. And whether that happened, I can only go by what they told me. But I do know that other individuals that have come from those communities, I said, listen, the local FBI in Williamsport is willing to talk to you. And they said, Andrea, we don't trust them. We don't trust them because there's so much corruption in the law enforcement, and they're not going to hear us. And there's going to be, problems if we do this. And so even with that being said, a lot of times when I get women out, people ask me, do you just call the police? Do you just get them involved? And I said, no, I don't. Because it would re-victimize the woman. One of the local DAs asked to have a meeting with me. Really nice gentleman, very nice. I can't say anything bad about him. But he told me, Andrea, I cannot offer protection for the woman. And I said, then I cannot give you any information. And you would like to have the information, I know, but I won't give that to you. And he said, I understand we have to have proof of a crime, and we'll put the woman on a stand and they're going to tear her apart. And they do, because I've been in courtrooms and they
Yeah,
do.
absolutely. Yeah.
So at this point, what we do is we always give any of the women a choice, because they've oftentimes not had one before.
Yeah.
And so we want them to feel a sense of independence. And if they want to pursue that, we will walk alongside them. But they often they don't know that they can handle that,
Mm-hmm.
kind of all over again. So what we do is we get them out and we get them safe and start allowing them to heal and process the trauma and the abuse that they've been through. And that's ended up working out at least better for them than if they had went through the legal process and got torn apart.
So what's your relationship doing all this like with the local police and things like that? Because I'm sure you've had some interactions with those groups. Like, I mean,
Sure.
yeah, like how do you get along with them? Is that kind of a mixed bag or?
A little bit of a mixed bag. I had a really sweet girl who was just so gung-ho about wanting me to get involved with the police. And so she took it upon herself to meet with one of the police chiefs in a local area, and I won't say which one. And she said, Andrea, he wants you to come and train the staff. And she was so excited. And can you contact him? I said, sure. In the back of my mind, thinking, I'll be surprised, but okay. And so when I reached out to him, he said, I'm just busy. I don't have time to train you. And I said, well, I think there's a little mix up. I don't need to be trained. I thought you needed me to come in and speak to your staff about what I'm seeing in our area for trafficking. And he said, oh, yeah. That's what I mean. And he said, yeah, that would be great. He said, but I have some cases on my desk and I just need to clear some paperwork. And when I do that, I'll get a hold of you. Well, that was about a year ago and I haven't heard from him, and I don't expect to. And so I'm always respectful of the law enforcement locally. But at the same time, I don't utilize them.
Yeah, that's
No,
that,
I don't. I'm very nice to them. I'm kind, but I don't know who to trust and not trust. And so we just try to, obviously, if a crime's been committed, or some of the ladies, they might have to go to court for some things. We help them, we facilitate things, or if they've ever had warrants, we're very willing to help them, get themselves turned in so that they don't add anything more to their charges. But outside of that, I pray it changes someday. Uh, but oftentimes they'll just say, oh, we didn't know this is going on, or yes, it's going on, but if we close it down, something else will just open. And I think, well, then you close that down. And if something reopens, then you close that down. It
that's
is a
kind
that
of that's kind of what you're supposed to be doing, right? Yeah.
right. And we've seen that happen. We've seen that happen because, again, we're just a family ministry. It's not like we're some big organization, but the amount of women and children that we have helped, even in the last year, is so astonishing to people, because they think that it doesn't happen in our areas. They're so used to like the movie Taken or Sound of Freedom,
Yeah.
which clearly do represent a form of trafficking, but they don't understand that all around us, trafficking is happening. They're
Yeah.
happening in churches, they're happening in our foster care system. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news on that, but I can't tell you how many women I've gotten out of foster care. They were in foster care in their life and they have been abused sexually. They've been sold.
Yeah.
Uh, and on the positive note, Union County Children and Youth, which is local, they did have me come in and address their staff and do a training. And now they do reach out to me to help other women and children in our area. So they've been really great. I've been very appreciative of them, but that system needs so much help. There's so much abuse. And that's the thing too. A lot of times people say, well, these women choose this. This is what they want to do. And I'm like, really? Are you sure about that?
Who wants to like that? Does that even make sense? Like,
I don't
really?
know. When I was I was kind of jokingly say this, but when I was in kindergarten or first, second grade,
You
they'd
didn't
have,
want to be a prostitute or like
I,
that wasn't on your list?
I
Yeah.
didn't have anyone in my class.
Shocker.
I didn't
That's
have
such
anyone
a shocker.
saying, I want to grow up and be a stripper. I have never heard that, in my life. And so that's what's so crazy because people make assumptions and judgments
Yeah.
and they fail to realize the abuse that women have been through. One lady, she said, Andrea, when your mom tries to sell you at a Kmart parking lot when you're 3 years old, how do you expect your life's going to end?
Hmm.
I had other bills that they were sold for the electric bill. They were sold because their parents were addicts. And when someone's struggling with an addiction, the addiction is more important than their children often.
Yeah.
And so if the choice is, I need my next hit, but I'm going to have to sell my child in order to do it, it happens.
Yeah.
And so you can't be surprised that when individuals their whole life they've just born into abuse and sexual trauma, it's not that hard to get involved in the adult sex industry.
Yeah.
Or individuals, our society, we're so focused on appearances and social media and what do we look like, and our teenagers are suffering, our youth are suffering because a lot of times the girls and boys too, they try to be significant. They hold their value and worth by what other people say about them.
Hmm.
And so people that are manipulators, people that know what they're doing, they know how to source the girls. They
Hmm.
see, oh, you're from a broken home. Oh, you don't have a father present. Oh, you think you're ugly. You think you're not valuable. And they just jump in on it and they promise them the world, tell them how beautiful they are. And very quickly, they can have them turned over into the adult industry or
Yeah.
have them do that the girls never signed up for.
Yeah.
Um, we've had situations where um, people did sleepovers and they were abused by that person's father or stepfather. We've had individuals that they shared pictures. They thought they were in a relationship with a guy, and the guy was like, hey, send me some pics. And they did, but then they would use them as blackmail. Like, if you don't continue to do what I'm asking, I'm going to put these everywhere.
Yeah.
That really plays on people's minds. In fact, we've had a lot of youth that have even committed suicide because they were so fearful of if these things came out, what were people going to think about them?
Hmm.
And that's what the challenge is like, what our goal is to help whoever comes before us. We get a little bit of slack with that because we get people from different lifestyles that reach out. They've reached out to 10 churches. No one would help them. Why? Because they lived a different lifestyle than what the church was okay with. And then they would contact me and say, listen, hey, I just want to let you know I'm trans. I don't even think you're going to want to help me, but I'm being trafficked. Why would I not want to help you?
Yeah.
Well, the 10 churches didn't help me because of my lifestyle. Well,
Yeah.
that's on them. That's on them.
Yeah.
Our goal is that we don't have like, oh, we're not going to work with you because of.
Yeah.
We don't place those limits on. It's a human being. You should
Yeah.
be wanting to however you can.
So let's start with this. How many like women have you worked with over the year, roughly this last year?
Like this last year, over 400.
I mean, that is insane. You're
It
in
isn't
you're in Pennsylvania. You started this like by showing up at a prison, taking a
Yep,
baby, and now like I mean 400, I mean like you think about the lives that's like touch and how many people like now the people helping you with safe houses and stuff, you said they're mostly like regular people, like not associated with necessarily any certain type of organization. These are just people that
right.
along the way, friends of friends kind of thing.
Yeah. And what's amazing about that is, and we've helped children and stuff too. And the youngest I've got now is 3 months old, and the oldest was 56. So
Wow.
it's really all ages. It's all ages, all races, all shapes, sizes. And we've even had times where we have children in our home that we maybe have, a temporary guardianship with, or we have custody of, because, maybe their parents are struggling, whether they're in the industry or if they're struggling with mental health issues or addictions. And that's been a very amazing experience too, because just the amount of love. A lot of times people say, "Oh, Andrea, you're such a blessing to these women and children," but they have no idea how much they bless our lives
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how I can't ever go back to who I was, because they've just changed me. They've changed me for the good. I can't unsee all the abuse and the trauma and the struggles. But what's amazing is the beauty from ashes. A lot of times, like people like to say, "Oh, beauty from ashes," but I have personally witnessed it
Yeah.
time and time again, where people that were completely thrown away by our society and disregarded, they came out of the fire. And what is it they say about, but they had buckets of water ready to put out the fire for other women.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the most amazing things that I've seen, is just how they've been able to come out. And then not only do that, but now I'll have women, like when I have to go get women, that could be at a hotel, that could be at a trap house, a casino, someone's home, a bus station, you name it. I've probably been there. I have other women that I've gotten out years ago. We travel in a pack because, we try to keep safe. But the one lady, she said, the one individual that got me safe and protected me, now I'm able to offer that back to you.
Mm.
And she does. And that's, to me, like, that is one of the most beautiful, like, experiences I could have ever received. It's just, she feels like I gave her a gift of a new life. And yet, what she does for me now, I mean,
Yeah.
words really expressed, the amazing experience that is.
That's beautiful. I love it. I love it. It's multiplying. It's going out and you know what I mean? Like what you're doing is multiplying, Like
Yeah. Well,
it's
we had a girl call the other day, and she just wanted to get out of the industry. But what came from one is, then she said, "Oh, I know this group of girls. They would like help too. Oh, and also I know this group, and I know this group too."
yeah.
And so what was supposed to be one, we did kind of a three-part at the same time of getting them out. Some people call it rescuing, but I don't like that word. I'm like, they don't need rescue. They just need some love and compassion. But at the same time, we were able to get out 9 women, 3 children at one location. And then we were able to get out, 3 at another location and 2 at another location. And so what came from one, her, even in her brokenness, she wanted to make sure others were taken care of.
Mm.
And then the very next day, there was other women that ended up coming out. And so I don't think it's something that's going to stop anytime soon. I wish it would, but I think we need to have the awareness in our communities and then put actions with it. Because I always tell people, I'm like, if you see someone hungry, and you just go up to them and say, "Hey, I'll pray for you. Sorry you're hungry. I'll pray for you." But
Yeah.
then you leave, no
You're
food.
not taking care of their need. Their
No. So it's like
need.
even just a basic need,
Mhm.
it opens the door to so much more. And that's where I just always tell people, I'm like, yeah, you can't do everything, but you can do one thing. And I've seen the ripple effect over and over again. And so I do. I have people that will donate clothing or toiletries or diapers, wipes, sometimes people will donate snacks, simple things that maybe some of the homes might need or appreciate. And that's where, like, 'cause sometimes people say, Andrew, I don't want to go to a strip club. I don't
Yeah.
want to do what you do, or it's too dangerous, Andrew, and you've had people try to attack you. I don't want to do that. And I get that. But they still have a piece, that's still woven in. They're able
Yeah.
to connect and help and because it is dangerous. For me to sit here and say there's no danger in it, that would be a lie. I've
Yeah.
had some interesting experiences. So yep.
Yeah. I mean, you've been into some of the most dangerous and seedy parts of society. I mean, those are not like safe places to go all the time.
They're not, but one thing that was so beyond beautiful was a gentleman had come into the one club years ago, and I knew that he was somebody just because of the way the women responded. And so he motioned for me to come over, and it still just gives me chills. So I went over, and the lady that was with me from Department of Health, she literally was scared to death. She's like, I want to run out of here. I'm gonna pee myself. She was about having a heart attack. And so I went over, and he said to me, he said, "Who are you?" And I just responded back. I said, "Who are you?" And he just looked at me so puzzled because he's used to being obeyed,
Yeah.
and his commands met. And then he threw a huge wad of money. It's only like you'd see in the movies out on the table. And he said, "Hey, I'm the one that owns all these women." And I said, "Well, no, no, you don't own them. But I know who does, and hopefully you'll figure that out someday too." He seemed so puzzled. He was just like thinking, but he said, "I know who you are." And I said, "Well, great, that's great." And then he did ask me why I was there, and I told him we were serving food. And long story short, he asked what we were having. I told him, and I served him food. And each time I saw him, he asked what we were having, and I served him food. The very guy that was selling the women. And also, he was running drugs and stuff, because you can control someone with drugs. He said, "Hey, do you really believe in all this stuff that you do?" And I said, "If I didn't, why would I be here?" He
Hmm.
said, "You someone like me who's done everything I've done?" And I said, "Yeah, especially for someone like you." And he had tears streaming down his face. Well, a couple weeks later, he ended up showing up at one of his family's local churches. And again, everyone knows him. He's a pimp. He's a drug runner. He's a weapon runner. You don't
Yeah.
mess with him. And he came in about midway, which again was, they thought, what's going on here? But he ended up walking down the middle aisle of his church, and he ended up giving his life over. And ever since then, it's been about 7 years now. He goes nationwide, and he goes to strip club parking lots, and he'll sit there and he'll wait for like guys to get out, and he'll say, "Hey, listen, I know why you're here. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But let me show you a better way." And he said, "Andrea, do you know what it's like to have revival in a strip club parking lot?" He's like, "It's pretty amazing." And I'm like, "Actually, I do. We've had some cry downs, showdowns, major
Yeah.
talk, the parking lots, just people driving by having no clue what's going on. But mostly people just are wanting to be loved. One thing I've seen is once they understand their value and worth and not of what the world has taught them, that changes everything. But it's really hard to understand those things when you have all these different levels of abuse and trauma in your life. And until you can peel those layers back, you can't even hardly begin to heal.
Mm.
So that's what we're trying to accomplish. Sometimes people say, "What's the end goal?" I don't know. Just I want to help whoever calls, whoever is put on the path before us. We just want to embrace them right where they're at, and go from
And,
there.
and you said you're not like interested really in making this like a nonprofit because you don't want the like because with the nonprofits you have to go through boards, you have to go through hoops. You don't want any of that, like, right? I mean, like it's just
I
Like,
don't think so. I don't think so. We've talked about it, but what we're doing right now is working.
yeah.
I think sometimes when we create all these boards and the government controls, they get in the way, and you have all these different opinions, and everybody just talks about the issue, and then nothing gets resolved. And right now, like, yes, we founded Mercy Run Ministry. It's our family's ministry, but it's really the people we serve's ministry. It's the women, it's the children. Jeremy and Jeremiah, they do prison ministry nationwide with men that are incarcerated. It's their ministry. We let their opinions and what they feel they want, we let them guide the path
Hmm.
with this ministry. Because to me, it's like they're the ones that have had to experience it.
Yeah.
Um, who's a better teacher than them?
Yeah.
I'm just here to help and be used however he needs me to be used at this point.
So I want to talk about pushback a little bit because you
Yeah.
kind of got into that, but like you've experienced, I mean, not just in your fan, but you've experienced a lot of like pushback in general. Like, talk a little bit about that. Was there anything that like surprised you about that when you really started getting into it? Was it more or less like what you expected to hear, or did some things kind of surprise you?
As far as pushback from individuals like against me doing this or
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
yes, because I think the biggest group that surprised me was what people would consider the church group.
Yeah.
Now, different denominations, some more than others, and I won't point them out.
Yeah.
That surprised me because the whole, even in all my upbringing, the biggest thing is you're told you're supposed to love someone. Like if you are to be like him, you should act like him. You should love like him.
Yeah.
He didn't have all those conditions. And in fact, many of the people that he used in the Bible, they would not be used in churches today.
Mm-hmm.
They'd say, nope, nope. Do you know
Yep.
what they are? You know what they've done? And you
Yep.
can't discount or discredit someone
Yep.
that he thinks and he wants to use. Try it. It's not going to be successful for you. So
Yep.
that I think out of anyone,
Yep.
sometimes people make comments. I had an individual that I spoke at a group in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania by State College. And I did have an individual come up to our daughter and say, hey, does your mom put these women in her vehicle? And she said, yes. And she said, oh, that's gross. I just make them stay outside the vehicle. And so sometimes you get these comments that you're like, really? Did you just say that?
See that? Yeah.
And I've had some individuals that went along and then they were shocked because, they were like, I can't do this. These women aren't dressed. And I thought, well, I assumed you knew we were going to a strip club. Like they don't wear clothes.
Yeah.
Um, those kind of things I can understand a little bit, of just maybe ignorance in those topics. But the
Yeah.
church today is probably the biggest. It's heartbreaking to me because, and that's why a lot of the women, they've been abused in church settings or even in the foster care setting. They were taken from their home for even sometimes smaller reasons and placed in a good Christian home only to be sexually abused and used and sold. That's a problem. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times, and some of the churches said, why don't you plug the women into the churches? Why don't you just, you bring them, we'll bring them up front and we'll let them see what you've done, Andrea. And I'm like, really? Because I mean, I know I wouldn't want to line up front and you go down my whole life history from my past.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid the women in front of a church group. That like they do. We have Bible studies in the homes if they want to participate. Um, and that's been a beautiful thing because they've actually been able to relearn or learn like faith in a healing way,
Yeah.
not this like commercial
Yeah.
box church setup.
Yeah.
And that's made a huge too. It's that personal relationship with him and
Yeah.
not just like all made standards put on him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that yeah, that's a surprising group. And I mean, law enforcement does surprise me to a point
Yeah.
just because it's supposed to be there to protect them.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a little too close for comfort for them too.
Yeah. So, like, talk about like, okay, so not in your community because you're in Pennsylvania. What if like some people are hearing this and they're in small towns, like, would you recommend like kind of what you did to get started? If somebody really wants to get involved with this kind of ministry, would you recommend them going out and just bringing food to people? Like what would be like a starting point? Or like you said, if they're uncomfortable with that, like, I mean, what is the best place, especially knowing that um some of the churches and things aren't necessarily eager to help in that. Like how do they get started? What is a good organization if they want to do it that way, or is it just donating? Like, what do you recommend?
I think, across the like nationwide, if individuals are interested, one of the biggest things you can do is actually communicate with other people. My kids kind of laugh because it doesn't matter where I go to, people talk to me.
Yeah,
Complete strangers, they tell me their whole life story.
yeah,
But often there's so many people that are just waiting for someone to listen to them, to interact with them. And when you start doing that, you right there learn
yeah,
a lot in your community.
yeah,
If you have friends, like if you're like, hey, it's me and my six best friends, we want to do something together. Yes, if there's local clubs, or if there's local mental health places, or places that help with addictions, or local prisons. I mean, we have a list a mile long right now of individuals that just want someone to write to them in prison,
yeah,
and we can't get that filled. So you could start by writing people. A lot of times the women that are incarcerated, there's a variety of reasons. A lot of them can be, prostitution, drugs, theft. That will be one way to get involved. There's also local pregnancy care centers in people's areas that people could get involved in. A lot of times too, the women that are coming into those organizations, or like a domestic violence shelter situation, those would be ways to kind of creep in,
okay,
as so you could get comfortable. And if someone was just bold enough, like, hey, I just want to start taking a meal to the local club, biggest thing I would advise someone is make sure your heart's really in it,
yeah,
because I can assure you they will spot you a mile away.
yeah. If you're not authentic, yeah,
You have to have that pure, unconditional love. And I would also advise not going by yourself.
yeah,
Um, it isn't it isn't something to take lightly. You do want to absolutely be protective and just have a plan in place. And also not to have an expectation of, hey, I'm going to go in and immediately women are just going to start following me out.
yeah, yeah,
Because that's just not at this point in our ministry. Oftentimes it's because of the women have gotten out, they know someone. They
yeah,
know someone. They know someone. And they've been able to tell them, listen, she's who she says she is. I've built a relationship and established trust through the years.
yeah,
And so those are definitely, ways to get involved. If someone like wanted to get involved with our ministry locally, they could do so. Like you could help with mentoring some of the local women that we have. We accept donations, like if someone has clothing, or toiletries, diapers, wipes. We do have like Venmo, PayPal, our ministry mailbox. We have a ministry page on Facebook called
yeah.
Mercy Run
Yeah,
Ministry.
so tell
Yeah.
everybody that slowly so they could follow it, and we can put it in the comments too.
So on Facebook, it's under Mercy Run Ministry.
Mercy Run
And
Ministry.
yep. And on that page, it would have our mailbox. We do take donations that way. And then we have Venmo, which is Mercy Run Ministry. And there is like a link sometimes under the needs that you would see. And then also PayPal. And if you're local, oftentimes I'll just meet someone, if they say, hey, I have some clothes, or I have this for the women. And I just actually got to speak with a Soar Optimist group. They're an international group. They asked me to come and speak. And they're really amazing because they help women from domestic violence and abuse and trauma. And they actually have opportunities for, if they're moms, to get grants for going back to school.
Hmm.
And so I'm very excited that we just got linked up, and they
Yeah,
had me come with them. So that was
that's
exciting.
awesome. Where are you going to be speaking at?
I just spoke with them this last week. I met with the local group for Snyder, Union, and Northumberland counties. So that's exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So as far as like the future goes for you, you've talked maybe about doing your own podcast with stories or writing a book or two or more. And like, what do you see like future wise for this as we're kind of starting to wrap it
Well,
up?
one thing is, the women said, Andrea, those would be great avenues for people to also hear our voice, because they have felt for so long that they didn't have a voice, or they had one, but nobody listened to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've walked this path with them for now 8 years. And I would be able to tell their stories, or give them an opportunity to tell their stories if they would be willing to share on a podcast. And I think it continues still to bring the awareness and just make it to be more of a natural topic to talk about.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
to not feel like it's so taboo to talk about these things. And so that is something that I'm looking into, just trying to figure out how to start the podcast. And for years now, my husband's been after me about the book because I enjoy writing, and I would like to, for the women's voices to be heard, even if it's words on a page. It would continue to offer them healing, and maybe reach people that have experienced the same things or are going through the same things. And that would just be a beautiful connection there too.
I love it. Well, I really appreciate again you taking the time to do all this. Like, as we're kind of wrapping up, you told them the Mercy Run Ministry, they can follow you there. Is there anything else you want to like say as we're kind of wrapping things up that we didn't like mention, or to like let people know that we maybe didn't mention on this?
I think we've pretty much covered everything, but I mean, biggest thing I would tell you is, going out into the world that we live in. Just look around, take a look around, offer a smile, offer kindness, offer simple acts of kindness. Whether it is you're paying for someone's meal, or paying for someone's coffee, or just complimenting them, or just saying, if you see someone maybe struggling, in the cashier, you feel that they're struggling, hey, are you okay? Are you
Yeah.
having a hard day? Or hey, your hair looks great. Those simple things, people just don't even understand how much that can mean to someone, because we all have struggles, we all have things that we deal with. But I don't know, I think there's just such a beauty in those things.
Yeah, I agree completely. And honestly, just to tell you this, like as we're finishing up, like I can maybe think of like it would be less than one hand of people that I feel like truly I know personally in my life that I've really seen demonstrate like God's heart and the love of Jesus, and you are one of those people because honestly, you're doing what Christ did when he came. Like I mean honestly, like there is not a lot of Christian people. I've been around churches my whole life. I've known a lot of people that claim that, and honestly, you are walking that walk, and I feel like you are one of the few people I've seen that really are sharing like in God's heart. And I thank you for what you're doing and the difference you're making, because you're making a huge impact, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this. So and as always, I always end my podcast with a little quote, and I found one from Martin Luther King that I think kind of like sums up what we're talking about. So it's love has within it a redemptive power, and there is power there that eventually transforms individuals. And that was from Martin Luther King Jr. So thanks,
I
cuz. I love you. I love you. I love your ministry. And yeah, so
Thank you, I love you too.
we'll see you all the next time.